engagement with them, because what we don't want is practitioners having to get into their car and go and travel for hours to come and have a face-to-face interview with us. The other thing, very quickly, service user engagement, incredibly important to us on inspection. Just want to make a shout out, because I think my colleague Karen Kendall is on the call. She's going to be implementing over the next few months a more extensive process of getting service user engaged. On a couple of our thematics, we made use of third-party service user organisations to get service user feedback. That worked really well, and we're looking for a mechanism of trying to do that at PDU level. Clearly, when you multiply it by the number of PDUs, it starts to become a huge logistical process. But Karen's working on that. In the interim, certainly for the next inspection, which is going to be Wales, we'll continue with our practice of assistant inspectors actually getting in touch with service users to get their engagement and feedback on the particular cases we've looked at. So that's what we're doing immediately. Anyway, it's enough from me. Probably hand over to you.
Okay, and Mark, I do realise you will still have to step into our offices, because obviously one of the areas of inspection is estates. So you do actually need to look at the physical environment in which we're working. So it's a balance, isn't it? But it's great to hear that you're going to continue, as we've discussed, with a kind of more of a mixed model in terms of the way you gather information. All right. I'm going to open up for questions now. Lots of you have posted questions or observations, so would you like to put your hands up? That would be really helpful. Come on, don't be shy.
We've had quite a few, Sonia, on particular themes. So if I start with those, and then people can be brave and put their hands up. So one of the first themes that came up was how we disseminate findings, and we had a suggestion, I think from Sasha, saying we could make videos to show in the PDUs to talk to better communicate findings and what we're doing about it. But I know that Kate White, you're on the phone, and you were talking about some work before that you've done jointly with HMIP on videos. Do you want to briefly mention that work?
Yes, thank you, Nicola. Yeah, we in the Southwest were the final region to be inspected before unification. So we're dealing with the action planning and the dissemination of learning at the moment. And we were very pleased to be part of the Inspectorate's Leaning In project, which involves us working together with the Inspectorate to try and really stretch the learning, stretch the reach of the learning from the Inspectorate in a way that's going to endure and impact. And just to let you know, we agreed 3 products that we would produce for the Southwest jointly with the lead inspector of the NPS inspection, Helen Morton. So Helen produced for us a summary of the report, and this goes back to Mark's acknowledgement, really, that the reports, need to be more accessible, need to be reports that will be appealing to practitioners, really, which they're not, I don't think, at the moment. And I know we can all acknowledge that probably. So a summary of the report, which is proving really useful because we're using it as a summary. And we're also planning to carve it up quite shamelessly as well and use, quotes from it and extracts from it and so on. The second product, if you like, was a presentation of the findings, and we went for not a kind of big bang, full on, whole staff group assembly for this. Helen Morton came and presented the findings to basically the quality development team and those who'd been trained as local assessors for the inspection, because we felt they were key people in actually making the impact of the learning work going forward. So that's happened as well. The third element, which we've been working on over the summer, is that we've produced 6 videos on various themes from the inspection report. Basically, our quality development officers have been turned into interviewers, and they interviewed Helen Morton around those particular themes. And she talked to us about what the actual learning was, gave some good practice examples, trying to bring to life really what was on the page in the inspection report. So we've got these 6 videos, which are about 15 minutes long each. And we're now putting together an options paper to say, exactly how they should best be used. But we're hoping that they will be attractive to SPOs for team meetings, etc. so that people can pick up something that is specific to their area of work and actually say, okay, what did the inspection find and how can we change our practice moving forward? So I just wanted to mention that those were the 3 products we chose in our region. I think the inspectorate, and Mark will correct me if I'm wrong, I think the inspectorate is hoping to carry on with the leaning in work. I was certainly really excited to be part of it, and we're planning to make good use of it in the Southwest going forward.
Kate, that's great, and I would really commend that kind of mix of engagement that you used following the inspection, not just focus, because I think, you know, not just focusing on the scores, but the actual narrative, and to do that in bite-sized chunks. And I think from some of the observations I've seen in the chat, we also need to probably get better at the way in which we promote the action plans. And also what has changed as a consequence of the action plans, which has made me reflect, because I'm currently involved in a piece of work with the police to get a more consistent approach to the way in which we conduct domestic abuse checks at court, which has been a recurring theme through a number of inspections. And I think we're close now to landing a national agreement. So I'm going to be a lot more creative, I think, in the way that we promote that once it's completed, to say the inspectorate told us this, and now we've done that. And we put more resource in so that our court officers can get that information that the inspectorate are looking for. Anyway, someone has put their hand up, and it's Helen Banner. So Helen, would you like to come in?
Thank you for that. Shemai, I'm from Wales, and a PDU that is currently going to be inspected in October. I welcome what Jake said and Adam said about the fact that potentially it's the preparation for the inspection that actually escalates and incrementally puts that stress on practitioners and the managers and the senior leads. And interestingly, Mark said about shortening the timeframes, but what potentially might happen, which I think is starting to feed through from my colleagues, is the shorter time frame shortens the timeframes that the practitioners have to get preparation ready for inspection. So I welcome the fact and actively wanting some of the literature that Adam is talking about always being inspection ready. I welcome inspections. I was in a PPO team for many years, and we had inspections annually, and actually it was a really good sort of opportunity to actually, this is what I'm doing, this is how we can improve, but we just need the time to be able to do that. And actually there has been that sort of long period of whereby we hadn't actively been able to actually be inspection ready because we hadn't had the time, opportunity to absolutely reflect on our casework and the impact that is having, and actually the feedback from the people on probation about how it's helping them as well. So that's just an observation from a mere practitioner.
Helen, no one's a mere practitioner. When you're talking about preparation, Mark referenced the fact that it's obvious when case files have been been upgraded and amendments have been made. But do you think there's still any space, and quite appropriately, for practitioners to be given the time to think about what they want to say about their case, and how they're going to present their work to the inspector?
Yeah, I think what Adam was talking about, having the time and that purposeful time with their SBO to actually do a bit of a review of the case. For instance, if you've got a LIFA review coming up, an annual one or maybe longer, you actually have the time attributed to actually look at the case, look at where things are at, look at whereby you could improve. Because actually, I think we can always look for areas for that improvement. We're not perfect, and actually we can tweak it a little bit more and tweak it a bit that way and engage. It's about having the time to spend with your SBO, I think, is the key to feeling less stressed in leading up to an inspection. But the SBOs are are being put under so much pressure to be inspection ready when it's announced, that actually it's taking them away from what I call as the coalface.
Okay, that's a really good point, Helen. So it's not about scrubbing up the case records that you'd value. It's actually just that reflective time to think about where you're up to with that case so you can talk about it. That's helpful. I will certainly take that away. Jake, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of pick up on that, really, to say that the people that I spoke to who found the preparation period positive were the people who said, my SPO is great. And they sat down with me and we talked about the case openly and honestly about what I'd done and what I could have done better. And, you know, and that prepared them substantively for the case interview. The people who were more negative about the preparation period were the ones who were told to go off and double check that their OASIS review had been done on time, that they'd done the requisite safeguarding checks and domestic violence checks and that kind of stuff, and not even necessarily have to interpret those, just that they were done. So I think there's a lot of scope, and like I said, there's a lot of scope for that preparation period being positive, and that's the way to do it, not just that kind of box ticking kind of approach.
Jake, that's really, really helpful. So I guess we need to reframe what we mean by preparation, rather than simply say we're not going to do anything, because actually the people you spoke to said that's helpful to have that reflective space. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think, you know, as SEEDS 2 gets, you know, more embedded in the organisation and the RPSS gets more embedded and people get more used to having those reflective discussions with their SPO, then hopefully that will also prepare people for inspection as well.
Great. You took the words right out of my mouth. I was just about to reference SEEDS 2. So thank you for that. All right, I'm going to hand over to Kate and then over to Mark.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention the alert case system, because I think this is one of the reasons why those of us on the ground end up doing checking process of some sort, because we don't want to get alert cases, because the feeling is sort of culturally that that's avoidable, that we shouldn't be in that position. And I think some of the impetus behind directors and others wanting a checking process in place or a control process in place of some sort is to avoid getting alert cases. Now, I think that's a broader cultural issue about, you know, whether you have a blame culture or a learning culture. I agree we don't want alert cases because those cases potentially are dangerous in terms of public protection. It means there's a gap, there's a significant enough problem on that case for it to be registered as an alert case. I don't have a problem with the inspectorate having that system, incidentally, at all. That's not what I'm saying. But for your information, Sonia, I think one of the main reasons that alert cases are flagged up at the moment is because of the different standard relating to the DV and child abuse cases, child safeguarding checks that are required, and the inspectorate have a higher standard than our current policy in terms of which cases need to be checked. So some of that is really difficult to counter when a case is checked and it's found that, you know, at the beginning there was no DV or child safeguarding checks, you know, because it wouldn't fit within the policy of the probation service currently. It's acknowledged that the inspectorate are looking for more than that, and therefore those checks might then be instigated. So that's just for your information in terms of the national agreement, which I'm sure we would all really welcome around that checking process. I think some of the apprehension, some of the anxiety during that preparation period is around trying to spot cases that do need something significant done on them, if that makes sense.
It absolutely makes sense, Kate, and you're right, and this goes back as well to my earlier point. We should always be inspection ready, so we should have our own systems actually in place and that are working well to tell us when there are cases where there are significant gaps or worries. So the work that the regions have been doing post-unification on the critical casework list, for example, I think it's a good example, and we need to be doing more of that. But I'm going to let Mark respond to that, because the issue of alerts was also discussed with the RPDs as well. So Mark, would you like to come in?
Yeah, just building on something that Jake said. I mean, clearly, there's there isn't much difference sometimes between reflection on the cases we're coming to inspect and preparation. And therefore, of course, and building on Jake's point about seeds too, we would like to see reflection on all of the cases that are done as part of the management supervision process, not just the cases we're coming to inspect, which builds on what Adam said earlier about being inspection ready. So I just be careful about the messaging on reflection, just on those cases that we're coming to inspect, because I think that sends some culturally quite difficult messages. Coming out. Now, in terms of the alert system, yeah, we're very sensitive about this, but it is something that we feel really important. So I welcome the sort of revised national agreement that's coming in place, but we will always push the boundaries. I mean, we will always try and improve practice, and just because it isn't written in an MPS policy that they will do that, we do pull practice out where we feel actually the MPS could do better, even if it's against what they're saying in their policy. So I make no excuses for doing that. Having said that, we really try to only apply the alert process when it's absolutely essential. So we have conversations with practitioners, we'll have conversations with the SPO. We try and do things before we get to an alert, but if we do not feel that action is being taken quickly enough, or we do not feel it's been listened to enough, we will use the alert system. So we do try and avoid alerts because we know they're very destabilizing, and we don't report on the number of alerts in our reports that go out as well. It's just to raise local management attention to something which we feel is really serious. And actually, local managers should be aware of it anyway, if the supervision practice is going okay.
I completely agree with that, Mark. We should know where the weak spots are, but thank you for those observations. And I think the conversation we had with the RPDs as well was how we can work to have equal balance between alerts and when you find exceptionally good practice. So, and I think, how we can work together to do that, whether it's through our own comms in the way that Kate described. We don't just focus on the scores, we focus on the narrative. And whether there's a process in place as inspection is unfolding to kind of promote that exceptionally good practice in the here and now.
Absolutely, and we'll always try and draw attention to those on reports. And of course, Tammy outlined the effective practice product, which builds on that and tries to communicate that to all practitioners about where we've seen really good practice they might want to consider.
Brilliant. Okay, Adam, and then Glyn.
Thanks, Sonia. Yes, I don't want to over-egg the pudding too much in terms of inspection ready and that kind of thing. I think we really hammered that point home today, but I did just want to come back in on this point about alerts and so on and so forth. Kate, I think if it's getting to the point where the preparation for the inspection is to try and ensure that we don't have an alert case, I think we're already failing, if I'm honest with you. And I think that comes back to this idea that we should always be inspection ready where possible. I think also there, Kate, what's quite interesting is I think it would be good for to go through actual numbers of how many alert cases do actually come up, because I think it's a lot less than you might think. And like Mark said, there is a lot of work that actually goes into really only having an alert case where it's absolutely, so shocking, or there's something so imminent. And even then, I think, as Mark said, a lot of the time there is actually an opportunity then still for a practitioner to take some remedial action there and then to stop it being an alert case. So for something to become an alert, it really does have to be, spectacularly wrong. So again, it's a little bit disappointing to hear that's been your experience, that perhaps the preparation is about trying to avoid those, because our day-to-day practice should be avoiding such a low level anyway. And I think just to refer back to Jake's terminology, which I thought was really useful, I think the work that we're doing in trying to pull back the curtain, I think it does allow SPOs to become, what was it, Jake? Directors, detectors, and effectors. So I think what you're talking about there, Kate, is detective work, isn't it? It's trying to suss out, is this going to be an alert or not? And actually, Again, that's work we should be doing all year round to detect those cases and to take that action at the time when it's happening, which is when it should be done, because there's no point doing that just when an inspection's around the corner, because like Mark said, that will be seen through straight away. And I think SPOs can now kind of feel empowered to be directors, not just in terms of the staff that we manage, but also potentially directing upwards and managing higher level management anxiety from the level of insight that we now should have from the work that we've done. And of course, I feel there's quite a short bridge between being a director and being an effector, Jake. So maybe that's something that could be looked at in terms of, if we're directing, if we're setting a direction of travel as managers and as leaders of frontline staff, we should naturally be affecting as well. There's no good doing the directing without the affecting. We have to embody that level of practice, and be role models in that sense. So I hope that will change going forward.
And Jake, I have noted your comments about the way managers talk about alerts through inspections. So yeah, we have a collective responsibility to change that narrative. Okay, I saw another question from Glyn Holland.
Hi, yes. So I just wanted to pick up on something I put in the chat, which is around, I really welcome the move to the PDU level inspections for every 3 years. But as the regional and lead and pre-inspections in the West Midlands, I'm conscious that means there will be in the yearly inspections and at the regional level, and therefore what I was starting and to thinking through, and I've not reached yet the resolution, is how we maintain and the focus on a year-round basis at a regional level without actually making it almost a full-time role, if you like to keep gathering the inspection information, to be overseeing the action plans and how they build over time and how we make sure, and so on for my region, and there are 9 PDUs, so potentially 9 action plans, and how that would work, and how my role in overseeing those. So I think whilst the PDU level, absolutely, every 3 years will be great for them to taking it forward. I think for those in the regional teams where they have a responsibility around the inspections, it is just thinking through and how the relationship will work and how we provide enough information and enough evidence without having 9 separate action plans, all needing to be overseeing, or some say there will be overlaps, but actually some different things in that, and just like the regional level resource to oversee and to administer that. And so that was just actually my observation. It is an area that I'm still just thinking through and then talking to my RPD about at the moment.
Certainly, yeah, we are at a point of getting our heads around that, Glyn, and it's a really good point to raise. Otherwise, we could find ourselves swamped in a kind of confetti of action plans. So we do need to pay attention to that. And clearly as well, the way in which we respond back to HMIP and the way those action plans are signed off, because at the moment that's a responsibility that I have with OSAG. So it's that we've got to adopt a sensible approach that works for us as a system. But I don't know if Mark, if you've got any comments on that.
Year 1 of a regional inspection is clearly setting a baseline. He's clearly understanding quite a lot of what's going on in the region, what the priorities are, and what the improvements you're looking to put in. Year 2 is very much an incremental on top of that. What has changed? We're not going to be asking you to resupply all of the evidence in advance you've previously done. We'll be asking you to focus on where you think there are big areas or substantive areas of change that you've implemented. And of course, we'll be looking for an improvement in the outcomes. We'll be looking for the results of that as well. So we've got to work that approach through, but we're certainly not going to repeat a year 1 inspection in year 2, because we'll already have a lot of that evidence around there. It's just incremental. The other point about PDU action plans, yeah, clearly our opportunity to look at how well the PDU has implemented an action plan comes when we go back into that PDU 3 years away, but that's a long way away. So at a regional level, we'll be just looking for the evidence provided through OSAG, because OSAG collates all of these PDU improvements and action plans. We'll just be looking at what you've done to address the action plan we put in place. We won't be looking for reams and reams and reams of stuff. We'll just be considering what you already capture in your action plan recommendation monitoring systems, and whether we think that is sufficient, or whether that achieves the recommendation. So we'll try not to make it too onerous, Glenn, particularly if you've got 9 PDUs under your area of responsibility.
Okay, well, that's very reassuring, and Glyn, I will be working very closely with the RPDs and the heads of P&Q about how we switch to the new model in terms of oversight. Okay, we're now coming up in the last few minutes of this morning's session. Again, I just want to thank everyone for their contributions. It's been a really informative session, but I thought I'd give the last minutes back to Jake as the author of the research, just to give his comments and thoughts before we close this morning.
Thanks, Sonia, and thank you to everybody who came. I think one of the the last couple of years in terms of the pandemic have been really difficult, but in terms of the possibilities it's opened, getting 140 or so, people who work in the field of probation into one space on a Monday morning to talk about one's research is a privilege, which I don't think would have been possible had it not been for the pandemic. So thanks for coming. It's been really great to listen to the conversations and your engagement with the findings, and I hope that they do kind of result in some change in probation. I think for me, reflecting on the discussions in the chat and so on, if work can be done to try and reduce that anxiety that staff feel in the run up to an inspection, be that through becoming probation ready, through shorter time periods, through some kind of unannounced inspection thing. I don't know the HMIP are ever going to go for that, but and I don't think probation service would either. But I think it's really interesting that in that Slido we got quite a lot of people saying, unannounced inspections, unannounced inspections. I heard that so many times from practitioners. I know managers and I know leaders don't like it, but practitioners do like the idea of it. I think there's something really important, and we didn't really get to talk about it in depth in the discussion at the end about service user involvement and inspections, and I'm pleased that the inspector is doing more around that. And from what I can gather, the probation service is doing more as well. So that's really good to hear, and I look forward to seeing more, more progress in that area, and I'd be happy to do some research in that area as well. So yeah, I think just coming up to 12. So I think I'm just going to leave with one final comment, which was when I first thought about doing this project, my limited experience of inspection was I'm a vice chair of a governing board in a school, and we dread the day that Ofsted comes a calling. And I know our head teacher is, she is constantly, thinking about Ofsted. And teachers, from my experience, don't seem to like Ofsted before or after the inspection. And what really surprised me about this research was how after the inspection, people were generally pretty positive about it. And that's at all levels in the organisation. So I think that for me seems like quite an important kind of finding. So yeah, I'll leave it there. It's 12 o'clock. Thank you very much. Thanks to Sonia for hosting. Glad you could join us eventually.
Okay, and thank you, Jake. And you've ended the session on a positive note, which is always good. All right, then, I'm going to say farewell to everyone and thank you. Thank you for the conversation. Bye-bye.